equals in text, and that would add on to whatever was on the page and even surround that with paragraph tags. But the advantage of doing it with nodes is that you are guaranteed that your page is always going to be a valid XHTML and XML document. I could, for instance here, if using inner HTML, leave off the end paragraph tag. Just say, oh, I'll put the paragraph tag in later after I do something else, and then never get around to it, and we'd have an invalid page. The method with nodes is guaranteed to always give you valid XHTML. Using this approach, we know that it's being added into a proper place on the page, that we don't have to worry about ending our tags properly, we don't have to worry about it being half of an element. It's always going to work. So it's a little more wordy, but there are some benefits to go along with the drawbacks. And another is that inner HTML is not a standard and node manipulation is. So if for some reason you want to keep your stuff standards compliant, which is not a bad idea, you're going to want to use node manipulation. Next up, deleting nodes. Now that we can add them, we're going to want to get rid of them. After we've learned how to add nodes to a page, we're going to want to be able to delete nodes from a page. In this example, you can see we've added a simple HTML link to our page that just says delete last paragraph. Now we need to make it alive with JavaScript. If you're following along with the exercise files, this is Chapter 10, Example 2, script.html. And the only change that we've made to the HTML file is this link here. It says delete last paragraph, and it has an ID of delete node. So, as you might guess, we need to do something about delete node in the JS file. Here's where we left off with our last example. So now we're going to add the code to delete nodes after we've added them. Document.get element by ID delete node dot on click, that's the link, equals del node. So now we need to add a del node function down at the bottom. Function del node. We want to take a look at all the paragraphs on the page. And we know the way we do that is to go and look at them by telling the document that we want all those objects. So get elements by tag name. P gives us all the paragraphs on the page. Then we want to know, are there any? Does this page actually have any paragraphs? We check that by taking a look at allgraphs.length. If allgraphs.length is greater than 1, then we can do something. We're switching back to the HTML file for a moment to show you that there actually is one paragraph on the page already, which is around the text area field. So that's why we're looking to see if allgraphs.length is greater than 1, because if there currently only is 1, then we don't want to accidentally delete the text area field itself. So back to the script.js file. If there are some paragraphs that we can delete, then we do the following. We say var last graph equals allgraphs.atom. That gives us one element, whatever that element happens to be, out of an array. The one we want is allgraphs.length minus 1. That's the last one, because an array goes from 0 to 1 less than the number that's stored in length. And we take the document body again, and it's equal to document.get elements by tag name, passing it the body. And on the off chance we're doing something really bizarre, we're making sure we're just getting a single element. And we say var removed is docbody.remove child last graph. And that removes that element from our page. And that's all there is to that. The only other thing we want to do here is else we want to just say, hey, you're not supposed to be here. You shouldn't have done that. Nothing to remove. Because it's always a good user interface idea to tell them if there's a problem versus just failing silently. Because if it fails silently, somebody may think it's actually doing something. So let's save our file, switch over to the browser, and reload our page and see how it works. Here's some text. Oh, wait, I misspelled that, so I'm going to delete that. And now it's gone. Now I can add it again and say, here's some more text. And even more. And then I can delete them and add them back. And maybe I'll delete a couple of them this time. So you can see we've added them to the page and removed them from the page. But there's something to keep in mind, which is that things that we're adding to the page are only for the life of this user at this session. If this person comes back tomorrow to this exact same website, that will not still be there waiting for them unless we've saved something in a cookie or they have not gone to a different site or closed that web page in some fashion. And nobody else browsing to your site on a different machine, on a different computer, is going to see those nodes. It's all local. It never gets past the client and their own browser. Next up, we're going to learn how to delete specific nodes, not just the last one. We've covered how to add and delete nodes, but sometimes you want to delete a specific node, one in the middle, not just one from the end. So we're going to learn how to do that now. We've changed the interface of our page a little. Now we've got radio buttons, add node and delete node, and a pull down that we'll be setting up soon that will let somebody pick which paragraph they want to delete. So let's get to it. Here's the HTML file. What's changed are these two radio buttons in a group named Node Action, the paragraph selector with the ID of graph count. There's a new submit button, and most importantly, there's a new div at the end called modifiable. And instead of just modifying the body itself of the page, we're going to be using the modifiable ID to help us figure out what we want to delete and what we want to add. As always, the heavy lifting is done in JavaScript, so let's get to it. For those of you with the exercise files, this is Chapter 10, Example 3, script.html and script.js. We're starting off with the code from the previous example, to which we'll be adding some code and modifying some code. First, we're going to add a new variable called node changing area, and this is going to contain our container on the page for where we're going to add, delete, and modify nodes. We need to change init all so that instead of calling the add node function, now we want to call node changer, which is a new function we're going to write. And we also want to initialize our node changing area to be equal to document.getElementById modifiable. And that is where we're going to be keeping the paragraphs that we add, or at least any that we don't delete. Add node only changes a little. In text and new text are the same. New graph is the same. But because we aren't appending the paragraph to the document body anymore, these lines go away, and because it's not on the submit, that line goes away. Instead, what we're going to do is append it onto the node changing area. So we do that here. Append child new graph. And that's add node. Del node changes a little bit more, because we're going to be deleting a specific node, so we need to figure out which node it is that we're going to be deleting. So first we figure out what node to delete, and we do that by setting up del choice, the document.getElementById, and that's stored in graph count dot selected index, because that's the select statement, and they can pick which one they want. All graphs is no longer based on document. It's now based on node changing area. Just because you've almost always seen get element by ID, get elements by tag name and such used on document doesn't mean that's the only place that you can use them. They can be used on any container, and node changing area is just a container that we're going to be using. after we set all graphs, we want a new variable called killGraph.